Digest in association with Golden Fry.
I'm sure you've heard the famous saying, "You're what you eat." And true to that, what we eat affects our daily body functioning. If you're worried about getting a heart disease, one of the most important things you can do today is to start eating a heart-healthy diet.
Use dietary means to try and prevent yourself from getting that. If you're overweight, then high blood pressure is very common. It's common to the extent that if you lose weight, then your high blood pressure may be cured in many instances. If you're overweight, then diabetes is common, such that if you lose your weight, it's possible that you can reverse the diabetes. And of course, smoking is smoking, but it's also associated with weight. But specifically in relation to which diets are appropriate, there's evidence that what we call a Mediterranean diet, it's the most studied diet, is associated with a better, reduced risk of cardiovascular disease than a standard diet. What's a Mediterranean diet? Well, it involves olive oil, grapes, and fish. Lots of fish, white fish that we can get access to here in Kenya, and even fatty fish. Anything other than that is not associated necessarily with a better outcome, except of course any diet that prevents you from getting diabetes, high blood pressure, and overweight is a good diet, because it means that you're less likely to develop the problem in the first place.
Kenya's stepwise survey for non-communicable diseases risk factors 2015 report says death due to cardiovascular diseases in Kenya range from 6.1% to 8%. But post-mortem studies suggest that more than 13% of cause-specific deaths among adults could be due to cardiovascular diseases. Dr. Jilan Mohammed is a cardiologist at Aga Khan University Hospital in Nairobi.
Common form of heart disease is caused by blockages in the main arteries of the heart. That's called coronary artery disease, and the most common cause of that, in fact, is lifestyles. Diabetes and high blood pressure are big risk factors, and the third major risk factor for this is cigarette smoking. And we're finding a significant rise in the incidence and prevalence of these conditions. And as a result, we're finding that heart disease is now becoming the biggest killer of Africans in sub-Saharan Africa, even as we speak.
Excess weight is also said to be a contributor of heart diseases. Dr. Mohammed says a healthy diet and lifestyle are one's best weapons to fight cardiovascular diseases.
Diabetes can be prevented or indeed reversed if people adopt better lifestyles. High blood pressure likewise. Amongst the causes of high blood pressure and diabetes are being obese, and being obese is a level above being overweight. It's surprising how many people in Kenya at the moment are indeed obese and don't realize it. Obesity isn't being the largest Kenyan in town. Obesity is about having a ratio between your height and your weight that is skewed more in favor of your weight. So at a certain height you're expected to be a maximum weight, and if that weight is exceeded, you become overweight. And if it exceeded beyond an average, then you then become obese. And you'll be surprised, even in this room, that probably one or two of us are already obese. So if you want to be sure that you're not obese, then there's two simple calculations, but the one that I'd recommend, bearing in mind that it is easiest and probably fairest, is what we call a body mass index. You measure somebody's height and you measure their weight, and when you calculate their weight in kilos, you divide their height in meters, and then you divide their height in meters again. So if you are 72 kilos and 170 centimeters, you'll do 72 divided by 1.7 divided by 1.7, and you'll end up with a number around the 25 mark. That would suggest that you're just on the border of perfect weight and overweight.
Incidences of coronary heart diseases are said to increase progressively, especially if one's body mass index (BMI) is high.
So if you want to be sure that you're not obese, then there's two simple calculations, but the one that I'd recommend, bearing in mind that it is easiest and probably fairest, is what we call a body mass index. You measure somebody's height and you measure their weight, and when you calculate their weight in kilos, you divide their height in meters, and then you divide their height in meters again. So if you are 72 kilos and 170 centimeters, you'll do 72 divided by 1.7 divided by 1.7, and you'll end up with a number around the 25 mark. That will suggest that you're just on the border of perfect weight and overweight. If you go above 25, you're in the overweight zone, and if you go above 30, then you're obese. So the average Kenyan who's 5'7", 5'8" Kenyan man, if their weight is above 85 kilos, it's very likely that they're now obese. So for the average Kenyan, the target weight should be less than 85 kilos, and much less than that if you want to be in the normal range.
Basically, what you put on your plate can influence just about every aspect of heart health, from blood pressure to cholesterol levels that can block your blood vessels.
Lifestyle-related heart disease, which is blockages of the main arteries. What tends to happen is that your blood pressure rises, and the blood vessels that are sending blood not only to the rest of the body but back to the heart, because the heart is a very hungry organ. It pumps 60 to 100 times in every minute, and it's a muscle, so it needs its own oxygen. So those blood vessels are called coronary arteries. And when those arteries start to fill with cholesterol around the wall, then the space for the blood to pass through is less. And when that space is significantly reduced, like say there's a 4-lane motorway and you're suddenly down to 1 lane. So if it becomes 75% or more narrowed, then you end up with a problem with congestion of getting blood from one side where it's full of oxygen into the heart. And when that happens, the heart muscle complains. You get tired because the heart is unable to circulate oxygen to the rest of the body. And you may feel a pain in the chest. If that pain happens quite abruptly, then it could be that all the vessels have suddenly blocked, or the main vessel is completely blocked. And if that happens, you could be suffering a heart attack. So difficulty breathing, pain in the chest, fatigue, and then as the heart becomes weaker and weaker, it stops circulating and the fluid builds up in the legs, and you end up with something called heart failure. And the most common sign for that would be swelling around the legs, or what we call edema. But there are other causes of all of these symptoms. So difficulty breathing can be caused by many things. Commonly we're hearing now that if you have it, you may be concerned about a virus. But there are other causes like asthma and being overweight that can cause those symptoms. So in general, if you feel you're not certain and the symptoms have been building up gradually, find a doctor and see whether they can help you establish what the cause is. But if it happens suddenly, then that could be something quite dramatic, and it could be a heart attack.
Dr. Muhammad explains how one who already has a heart disease can prevent his or her condition from deteriorating.
So there's a variety of lifestyle efforts that you can adopt. Apart from watching your weight and managing your diet, if we think about diet specifically in relation to weight gain and diabetes, carbohydrates are a concern. So if you can control your carbohydrates quite aggressively, then that gives you a good chance.
In addition to proper diet, regular physical activity is one of the best things one can do for their health.
Apart from that, getting your body fit physically is important. Walking about 7,500 to 10,000 steps per day is a minimum expected. And Kenyans, we're quite good at being active. But nowadays we've adopted matatus and public transport means that may not necessarily allow us that amount of exercise. You need to do your best. So exercise as much as possible is one of the best medicines. In fact, there's no medicine that humans have ever invented that will prevent you from running into problems in the future that has outperformed exercise. What they say is try and get your heart rate up. Do enough exercise so that you're walking at a faster heart rate. In other words, you're doing enough exercise that gets your heart rate above 100 beats per minute. And you do that for a minimum of 30 minutes a day. And if you're below the age of 50, you should be doing that 5 times a week. If you're above the age of 50, you can do it between 3 and 4 times a week. But you need to try and do that as actively and as aggressively as possible.
Where the heart lies, let the brain lie also. The way you guard your heart, the brain should receive the same treatment in equal measure. Just like a car, your brain functions better when it gets fueled. And here, it is what you feed it. Just like a car, your brain can be damaged if you add anything other than fuel to it. And this starts with what one feeds the brain from when they're a toddler.
It comes from when we are toddlers, all the way from pregnancy to old age. So much of what we actually get to have, or what we are running with right now as adults, came from how our mothers took care of us. And this is where the concept of breastfeeding comes in. So breastfeeding is when you're already born, but before breastfeeding, what really happens prior to that is during pregnancy. Now, the brain develops from day 18 of pregnancy. So 18 days into pregnancy, the brain is starting to develop in a complex system dubbed as the central nervous system. Now, you cannot talk about the brain and leave the spinal cord out. They are completely connected. So if one side, if the lower side, there are two sides, yeah? So if one side does not close, there's going to be a problem. If the upper side, which is now what forms the brain, does not close, then you will not have the brain forming entirely. Now, that's a condition called anencephaly. So during the pregnancy, and mostly when you're talking about, for example, severe acute malnutrition, or better still, protein energy malnutrition in pregnancy, that's going to lead to poor brain development.
For good functionality of the brain, good cooking oil is also important for the brain nutrition.
Cooking oil comes in form of, type of fatty acids or entailing fatty acids. We've got long chain, polyunsaturated acids. So when you're talking about brain nutrition, we talk about the long chain polyunsaturated fatty acids. And you're looking for the cooking oil that is clear, all right, has been noted to be heart-friendly as well. I mean, every cooking oil is heart-friendly, but what the body utilizes, what we eat, the body actually breaks down and picks up what is required. The excess of it is either eliminated or excreted or stored. So when you're talking about cooking oil, we talk about the what is contained in the cooking oil. We've got vitamin A, D, and E being fortified into the cooking oil, and recently iron is being propagated to be fortified in it. And iron entailing cooking oil is excellent. Why? Because the brain cells require iron pretty much to ensure there's communication, myelination inclusive in the brain development and even in the brain maintenance. Brain cells utilize energy in terms of glucose, yes, but the beauty about cooking oil is in ensuring that there's continuous cell differentiation involved when you're talking about brain nutrition.
According to Grace Njuguna, it's not an oxymoron to say cooking oil promotes brain health and a healthy heart.
I say there are two sides of the coin. All right, so there's the cooking oil being utilized very nicely, and then there's the overuse of that cooking oil. Let's talk facts. The way of cooking in Kenya can be wanting and worrying at the same time, because we do not measure how much cooking oil is placed into the sufuria to actually be, to cook the food. And they'll say the more the cooking oil, the tastier the food. That is something that is said. But hey, the truth is, everyone have their own needs. All right. So you have to look at it from an individualized and a personalized point of view. Is cooking oil good for heart health? Yes, especially when that cooking oil contains polyunsaturated fatty acids therein. Can it be bad? Yes, because the body is totally dependent on that cooking oil to form cholesterol. Please note, it's not that the cooking oil has cholesterol. No, cooking oil does not have cholesterol. It's the simple fact that this system is dependent on how much is going to be taken in to produce that cholesterol, making what we call bad cholesterol in the blood going up, and that which is actually beneficial to us being very low in the blood. So, like I said, there are two sides of the coin. While you are utilizing the required amount of cooking oil, there are other sources of these particular nutrients, as much as they're fortified into the cooking oil, that will be found in naturally occurring food sources. So if you're talking about vitamin A, for example, you'll find it in orange entailing, colored on entailing, in this case, color orange entailing vegetables. You're talking about carrots, you're talking about butternut, you're talking about the pumpkins, yeah? So you are taken care of that way. If you're talking about vitamin E, apples are an excellent source of vitamin E. If you're talking about zinc, nuts and seeds are the richest source of zinc. If you're talking about vitamin C, which is not basically normally fortified into the cooking oil, but hey, it's a really important antioxidant. You're going to find it in bell peppers, you're going to find it in oranges, any form of citrus fruit in this particular case, and pineapples. So hey, yes, there are two sides of this coin. There's the element where you have to say, hey, there's an individualist personal approach, because we are not the same. We do not metabolize nutrients the same. And there's the other side where we are getting these nutrients, we also get an excellent, good amount of it from naturally occurring food sources.
The brain is kind of a big deal, as it's the control center of your body. It's in charge of keeping your heart beating, lungs breathing, and allowing you to move, feel, and think. As Dr. Dilraj Sohi, a neurologist, explains, there are various conditions that affect the brain that are related to nutrition.
The common diseases we see in our practice are in fact the ones that are also related to lifestyle and nutritional issues. So going from top down, headaches, strokes, epilepsy, memory issues, and problems to the nerves going down your arms and legs. So yes, it affects the entire nervous system. So if you look at each disease on its own, for example, like headaches affect both genders, mainly women, and it can be of any age, young to old. Strokes again affect a wide age range as well. Epilepsy is across the age range. Memory problems, more in the older generation, but frequently we are now seeing more people coming with memory complaints at a younger age, which again are usually lifestyle and nutritional driven. And again, sleep issues and nerve issues again are across the board. So there's no real big discrimination. There are some that are more common in others. So for example, strokes are more common in slightly older people, memory problems in older people, etc.
Such conditions end up affecting the brain immensely, he says.
If we take the first example I gave you, which is headaches. So migraine headaches are very common in the population, and in fact are one of the most disabling diseases across the world, because a lot of people take time off because they have bad headaches and they can't work, etc., and it really affects their life. And it can be due to a combination of things, not sleeping well, not eating well or on time. Strokes, for example, when someone gets a stroke, a part of the brain stops working because it hasn't had blood supply to it. And depending on how much damage is caused, that in itself can lead to permanent disability thereafter. So for example, someone may have a speech disturbance or weakness down one side that may stay on for the rest of their life. So it can be quite disabling. And that's a complication of it too. Things like epilepsy, and one of the commonest causes for epilepsy across the world are taking too much alcohol or taking other drugs that you're not supposed to be taking. That in itself, epilepsy has its own tragedies. People have car accidents, They sometimes pass away in their sleep, or they have a prolonged seizure, never wake up from it, etc. So each disease has its own complications, and some of them can be much longer lasting, but each of them can be equally very debilitating, and can affect the person's life either in an indirect or direct way.
The food one eats plays a key role in keeping one's brain healthy and can improve specific mental tasks such as memory and concentration.
There's a lot of information out there from nutritionists and supplement pharmaceutical companies that if you take these supplements, they're good for your brain, etc. What has been found over the decades of research that have been done on these supplements is that largely they don't really have a big effect. Let's just talk about supplements you buy over the counter, for example, pharmacy. There's a lot of brain tablets or healthy mind tablets that are out there, and there's no evidence really that they help longer term. They may make you feel a bit better because you're taking something for your problem, but they don't work. What we do know is healthy for the brain is doing the basic things correctly. So, eating a balanced diet, having your share of fresh fruits, vegetables, your meat, carbohydrates, and eating in a timely fashion. Moderating your alcohol intake if you are drinking alcohol to the international limits so that it doesn't have any toxic effects on the nervous system.
From these experts, good nutrition goes a long way in keeping your heart beating and brain functioning. Be health-wise. For Health Digest, I am Bildin Waliaula.
Health Digest in association with Golden Fry.